All right.
Okay.
Awesome.
Going live.
And action.
And action. Just taking a couple minutes. And I'll just do a quick intro, Dominic, and then as always, I'm just going to toss it off to you and start sending out invites. Make sure we get people in here.
Cool.
Live.
All right.
Okay, guys. So welcome to another WORBLI Talks. We're sat down here with the team, and I'm sure we'll have more people joining us pretty quickly, but I'm not going to take too much time. I'm going to hand it off to the man in charge there. Dominic, what's going on? I'm happy to see you here again, and I know everybody's looking forward to an update.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, good to be back. I think this is just number 2, but getting it down smooth this week, which is nice. So yeah, just giving everybody an opportunity to get an actual live update of what's going on and ask a few questions near the end. So one of the things that we kind of talk about a lot is the why. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? Sort of, what's the point, right? You get caught up in the tech and apps and blockchain and all that stuff, and that's great, but what does it really mean? Like, why are we even bothering to do all this stuff? And building systems to disrupt banking and all that stuff sounds pretty cool. Bankers are an easy target, kind of the bad guys in the system from some perspectives. But, for us, it's always been about enabling. It's been about access and giving people an opportunity to participate in the system, in hopefully a system that's fair, right? That people are often well aware of the sort of investment opportunities that are out there for high net worth individuals. One of the things that gets bandied around in blockchain all the time is like accredited investors and, the restrictions surrounding early stage investment. And, the ICO model was kind of built really to circumvent this in a way, right? As an alternative for individuals to come together. Somebody's got to be on mute. I can't. It's loud. And so, it was a super cool thing. But what we've kind of found out is that if there's any possibility that these projects could be considered a security, meaning they don't pass the Howey test in the United States or various regulations in other countries, then it's kind of a problem. What we have is an illegal investment scenario. And so, there's so many reasons. And I think when you look at like what defines accredited investor in the United States, the summary is if you're rich, you're smart enough to lose your ass. And if you're not, then you're not smart enough to lose your ass. And I think that's ridiculous. It's not like, when I heard the term accredited investor at first, I thought this was something like neat, like you had to go through classes or something, or you had to have special licensing, right? Like, I'm an accredited investor. I can get into some complex shit. But the reality is, it just means you're rich, and you can prove it. And I can get that to some degree, right? Like, I guess you can afford to lose your money in risky companies. And there's no doubt that, early stage investing is risky. The ICO market of 2017 would have people believing that early stage investing is actually a way to get rich fast. But the truth is most projects fail, right? However, it doesn't mean that people should be excluded from the opportunity. It just means maybe that we need better protections, we need better due diligence, we need better information, education, right? All of that stuff. And so, one of the big things about WORBLI is access, is finding ways to do this in a way that allows people to make their own choices, allows projects to have unique opportunities for things like funding, to basically experience, the savings and efficiencies that come with large scale infrastructure, at least now, that blockchain kind of makes available at a very small scale, much like the internet suddenly allowed individuals to have things like publications for pennies. Whereas before the internet, if you wanted to start a magazine, right, which is basically now a blog, you had to have a lot of money, or you had to have a really compelling brand that a publisher would pick you up or whatever. So, blockchain is kind of in some ways for financial services that same leap. It allows us to move value quickly, transparently, trustlessly in some scenarios, cheaply. But if we don't create ways for individuals, regular users to access these things, then it's really going to just be another advantage for the existing status quo to, in some ways, possibly even tighten their grip on this access. And so I was just talking to the team earlier today, and one of the things, Matt, that you and I have actually talked about before, and many of the folks in the room right now, is the unbanked and underbanked. And that's kind of like a cool thing to say, maybe like, yeah, we're going to help all the super poor people in the world. And I think a lot of people say that, and it's bullshit. And for us, it really isn't, because it's something that represents, frankly, a huge potential source of value, right, and revenue for the project. I'll be completely honest. I'm not above, making a couple bucks off of a user if I'm providing value for that user, right? Am I going to be able to charge $50 per month account fees to somebody who has an annual income of $1,000? No. And that's a major reason why existing institutions don't service these folks. Risk, the fact that their infrastructure is expensive, and so they can't compete. And I get that. And that's not even something that I think we should necessarily be like grabbing the pitchforks when it comes to existing banks. They just kind of can't service a lot of these individuals. It is high risk. They wouldn't know if they started allowing, let's say, easy mobile accounts in parts of the developing world, if those were just going to get in the hands of terrorist organizations or other individuals that we certainly don't want to make it easier for them to, move money around the world and further their causes. However, we believe that over time, with the right innovation, that blockchain technology does create the opportunity to service these individuals. It does put the price low enough that there can be a margin, which needs to be there to incentivize anyone to do this in the first place, and really kind of bring something I was reading earlier today. I believe it was just the wiki around wealth distribution of wealth, but it was that 4.2 billion households globally, and this was like a 2013 thing, have under 10K net worth, right? 4.2 billion. And these are adults, okay? So like they're talking about like adults and households, right? So as a percentage of the actual adult population, that's a lot. It's well over 80%, right? Something around 7 billion and change total people, but that includes children and all that. So it's a substantial, when you start thinking about that, like for those of us who live in the United States and, let's just say middle or above class, middle class environments, you just don't see it. You can't fathom that. You can't fathom like 90% of your neighbors barely able to have enough money for food, because it just doesn't exist. And of course, but it does. And these folks are not able to participate in the global economy. The internet revolution we've talked about just passed them by. But I think there's a lot of us out here that are hoping that the blockchain revolution doesn't. And I'll say it for selfish reasons. And beyond the fact that there could be a potential margin here, it's for the fact that I want to see what 4.2 billion people can do if they can actually start contributing to society directly, globally, in an efficient manner. I think that would be amazing. I think the economic growth that would result from something like that would be phenomenal, possibly unprecedented in what can happen here. And that although we might want to believe that we're not affected by these regions, and maybe right now, this minute, I don't feel the effects of global poverty, we do. We feel it in environmental destruction. We feel it in consistent wars and violence. We feel it in the loss of these individuals being able to be kind of our global brothers and sisters, whereas instead they're sort of like far, far distant relatives, you know, almost as if they're on another planet. And so it just a little something about that doesn't get talked about. And, you know, as you're putting out stuff about your project and your white papers and stuff like that, you know, you don't do a long monologue about why you decided to do what you do, but it's been sort of brought to my attention that we don't necessarily talk about that enough. Why WORBLI? And we get that question like, why WORBLI, not mainnet? I think we've answered that 1,000 times. It's about compliance, but it is more than that. And I realize that it isn't just that we can't do a fully compliant blockchain on a fully public blockchain that's fully decentralized. It's about singleness of purpose and focus and intent. You know, how do you accomplish something so monumental without focus and intent, without an organized team like you see here that can all work together towards a common goal, without strategic partnerships and the hundreds of stakeholders now involved in this project? You can't do that in an environment without some structure and without the power to make decisions and create a singleness of purpose. Because this isn't a small thing. I'm not crazy. I don't think I'm going to make this happen tomorrow. You know, we're well over a year deep at this point, and I'm sure we have many to go before we realize that kind of dream. But we do get closer every day, and we get there a lot faster. And that's really another reason why WORBLI, why a blockchain that's private. You know, why the current iteration and structure that exists now for WORBLI, as opposed to, again, just doing this on any old public blockchain. And so that's sort of my answer to that, to some of the conversations we had today surrounding this, and we're talking about with our team. And I think it's important. And I think it's important for everyone on the call to continue to remember that, because I know that as I talk to each and every person here at the beginning of their engagement and as they were becoming a part of the WORBLI team, we had those conversations. And that's what attracted everyone here to this project. I know that for a fact, because I spoke with every one of these people at some point along that journey. And that's what got people excited. Like the fact that, yeah, this is actually possible. Like Dom's batshit crazy, but actually he may actually be onto something here. Like, this is legit. This can happen. And that's really exciting. I don't think the type of potential social revolution that's enabled by blockchain technologies ever existed in human history, not on this scale. And the internet, again, was a tremendous opportunity for organizing, and we've seen that, but it's also something that can be co-opted by social media in ways in which now, arguably, there's 4 companies controlling the web. And Rob, our CTO, brought an interesting point that, like, Google and Facebook probably would not have been allowed to exist in their current form. They're effectively monopolies. Facebook's a quarter of the internet traffic. You know, back when I remember my grandfather owned AT&T stock in the 80s, and he was bitching when they broke up, you know, AT&T because they had too much of a stranglehold on the telecom industry. I don't think their impact was anywhere near what Facebook's is, or Google, you know, or Amazon. Right. So it's strange and different, but blockchain is potentially the antidote for that as well in many ways. And so it's just something I try to remember too, after, you know, the long days and the long nights sometimes. As far as just a straight update, and then we'll roll into allowing questions. We don't necessarily have a ton this week, but we've been able to go public with our block producers and our team. We're working on a sort of a public announcement, but I know it's okay here to mention that EOS Titan has formed a strategic partnership with WORBLI on a few levels. One of those being that they're going to be helping us with optimization of the network and performance. And something we've spoken about, which is optimizing and maximizing transaction speed, is kind of our first goal. There's been some numbers out there. One of our targets is 15,000. We've mentioned that publicly. We think that's doable, but certainly we're going to try to get this car moving as quickly as possible. But it isn't just about raw power. So to reiterate on that a little bit and kind of dive a little bit deeper, you can spam a blockchain network with kind of like meaningless transactions, almost kind of dummy-esque transactions. That doesn't necessarily mean a lot. It has to be more than just transaction speed for us. It's kind of quality of the transaction, general scalability, traffic, in terms of like not just coming from one applications, but what's that look like when there's multiple applications, things like that. But we're excited about the partnership. It's a big deal. We've got a lot of great block producer teams, but working with EOS Titan is exciting. As everyone's aware, they're also the team that's spearheading the development of Utility X in the WORBLI resource model. And so just exciting, deepening that partnership. We're also did our tech meeting this morning. We're about maybe a week or two from some testing on the new UX for the portal. Pretty excited about that. Should be far more streamlined, a better user experience. The menu when you sign up for a new account now has you putting in your country of origin early, so that you then get a more custom experience that's relevant to your country as far as like which IDs to use and the format of the data, stuff like that. And it's just prettier. It's more streamlined. It's more attractive. So that's something we've been working on for a while, and we're pretty excited that we're getting to the testing phase there. We're also working on creating granularity in our accounts. We have a base user account right now and a corporate account, and we're working on accredited investor designation. And then that will pave the way for things like broker dealer in the future, or certified professionals. We plan on having a system of vetting any and all vendors or people doing business via WORBLI. Now, we can't control everything. It's not like every app's going to have to check with us because they've got their buddy doing their website design and he's not a certified WORBLI vendor, pull down the website. But it's more about just being mindful. There's just so much fraud in this industry still, so much fraud globally in many industries, but we need to be especially preemptive and preventative about protecting users and businesses for that matter. We had a kind of a scammer deal early on in the project around a group of programmers, that were helping us work on building our first iteration of our portal that pretty much ripped us off. So, it happens. I mean, it happens to all of us, no matter what kind of due diligence you try to do, or where the recommendations come from. And so coming up with these sort of designations is going to allow us to sort of tag the accounts. I think, and maybe I can have Rob say a few words about that when I'm done. But basically, it's going to enable a lot of cool features. And one of the super cool parts of this is that we expect to be one of, if not the first place or service or whatever you want to call it in history that's going to allow liquidity for early stage investments. Right now, if you're an accredited investor and you buy into a project in a private offering, you have almost no liquidity. I mean, you may be able to find someone to kind of buy you out of your share, but that's a multi-week process at best, right? So let's say I'm an early stage investor in Bernard's kick-ass blockchain accounting startup. I've put in 50 grand. I've got X number of shares or tokens or whatever the terms are. And it's been a few months, and I don't know. I need a major house repair. I need a new roof on my house. It's 20 grand. I don't have the capital. I need to get liquid. Well, I'm going to approach Sam and say, Sam, hey, you want to buy my 50K in this company or my network or whatever. And I even have to be careful with that, because it isn't like I can just throw it up necessarily on LinkedIn or social media, because that could be considered possibly advertising. I mean, it gets really murky. It's hard. I need effectively a private OTC deal with someone that's going to now buy me out. I have to get it okayed by the company. I mean, it's basically not liquid. But if you're an accredited investor on WORBLI and we have a pool of accredited investors and we create a forum or a service for matching these investments or possibly even tokenizing these early stage investments, you could have instant liquidity.
Dom, does it have to be early stage investments just on that one, or could it be because for example, existing small medium businesses are very hard as well. If you've got a share or a stake in those types of businesses, it's hard to get liquidity, isn't it? So it means all of those.
Well, that's a different thing. So that's sort of like the real estate tokenization platform, right? And what that enables as far as flexibility of real estate. But I mean, sure, what I see is eventually just a tokenization of any asset. And so, yeah, a small business could kind of approach a platform like WORBLI, where we just have an ability to kind of, as they say in the memes, right, tokenize everything, right? But there could be a process where you could submit a valuation for your company or something and say, I want to liquidate 10% of the equity in my small printing business or something, right? I'm sure, Sam, I see that enabling, but the accredited investor thing is just specific because it's about investments that, again, legally to be compliant, only accredited investors, they can only be traded to other accredited investors, right? So with your example, that's maybe like a small business just wants to tokenize and get some liquidity for an illiquid asset. But that could be made available to anybody technically because it's unlikely to be automatically classified as a security. It may or may not. It could be, in which case, again, yes, having a pool of accredited investors would be a huge asset for someone like that who's trying to get liquidity out of their company. But it opens up a lot of cool things. And again, it's about identity on the blockchain. That's why we can do this. Now, it's another level for accredited investor, and we have to use an additional verification for that. And we're working on possibly automating that in the future. But we feel pretty confident that we could just do it manually for now. As my Wikipedia article I was reading earlier with global distribution, there aren't a lot of accredited investors in the world. Not as many as you think. Certainly they're a fraction of the population, less than 5% probably, most likely, maybe a little higher in the US. But again, we can automate this in the future. So it's just a cool thing. Transledger, formerly Interblockchain, Didier Martin and his team, we've had some, back and forth in our Telegram and elsewhere. It's, hasn't been a secret that we've been working with them for a long time technically, but we're continuing to work with them on their FX platform projects and other things that they've been talking about, which is cool. They're doing ongoing testing on our testnet. They've asked us for a few more resources that Rob and I spoke with Didier last week. We're speaking with him again tomorrow. We'll be in kind of constant contact from here. We're hoping to get some inner blockchain technology testing going, kind of their IBC, and just moving sort of, let's say, WORBLI to EOS, EOS to WORBLI, that sort of stuff. And just continuing to roll out the technology that they have in the applications that we're working on in partnership with them and a few other people. So that's exciting. No dates yet. Everybody's been real hesitant to give dates, but we do expect to start seeing the activity sort of ramp up. But that's one that I think people will start to see things in real time in the next few weeks. It'll be IBC testing, and then there'll be testing of this portion of it, because it's the way their platform's being built. It's kind of an amalgamation of various technologies, which is cool. Utility X, I know that they were doing some final testing on the matching engine. It's a pretty complex, sort of mathematical, algorithm that's going on there. They have a very unique way they're doing the matching. I can say that one of the cool innovations is that it's not based necessarily on the speed of your bid or ask. It's about true price discovery. And I don't have anything else to say about that for two reasons. One, I don't understand it to the deepest technical details. I'm not a hardcore algorithmic trader, and two, they would kill me. But you know, when it goes live, I think people will be really excited. They've put a lot of time into this. I know that Origin and EOS Titan, the two groups working on this, have they all have backgrounds in the trading. They were telling a crazy story about how there was a building in Chicago, and back in the day, you know, it was all about who got their order in the fastest. And some of that was based on the speed of your internet connection. And the closest you were to the main sort of internet pipe in this big skyscraper building, the higher the rent. Because you had a huge advantage to get these little microtransactions in before, you know, this little edge on everybody else. And that could be a tenth of a cent, but when you're talking about millions of transactions, right, it was a huge edge or whatever. So they're very much using that experience in these industries to see sort of all the tricks and the kind of the junk that went on, and try to really fix that to create a far more honest platform in Utility X. And so I know they're working on that. I know they're working hard on the resource model contracts. You know, the derivatives, which is what Utility X was really designed for, where you're going to be able to effectively lock your tokens and then create derivatives, one representing like WORBLI utility. And when you sell that off at whatever the market value is of it, the purchaser can actually stake that in WORBLI for resources, but they don't have the speculative value portion, meaning they can't sell the whole token. And all of the rights that come with the sort of whole WORBLI token. They'll now have these two derivatives. So let's say you put up 1,000 WORBLI, you'll have 1,000 WORBLI utility tokens and 1,000 WORBLI speculative tokens, representing more like the total value of the network kind of thing. And all of this is designed to start to get far more sane price discovery for everything. A steadier valuation so that we can see what is the utility really worth. Because often if you're just selling the WORBLI token, to some people, they're only buying it for speculative purposes. They have no intention of ever staking the token for network resources. So to them, it's worth whatever they think WORBLI's worth as a whole. Whereas for the business that wants to launch an application, the token very much represents effectively their operating cost on the blockchain. And so that's a completely different ball of wax. In that instance, they don't really care what the whole project's worth. They care how much, you know, it's worth for them to do business, and hopefully, you know, make a good margin. And so I think it's going to be really cool. And it's going to get a lot closer to discovering real value of all of these things. So that's exciting. And then there's also the beginning of the WORBLI DEX, which will also use the Utility X technology. Because the matching engine, there's so much work into it, you know, we might as well include it in our DEX. And so don't have any timelines on the DEX at all, although I'm hoping to get some for that because I think that's really important. A little update on the exchanges that just popped into my mind. I didn't have this on my list, but we are, you know, working with an additional exchange. It's that whole blah, blah, blah. I can't say anything, you know, the way that works with these things, but there is another exchange that we're just going through the kind of due diligence with on both ends. And they seem pretty keen to list us, and we're pretty excited about this exchange. We think that that it's going to be a really good relationship for everybody. So there is more. I know we get asked about that a lot, but there'll be at least one more exchange, hopefully in the relatively near future. Again, hard to give any timelines. It's all in how quickly they process some of this stuff. Tokenoro, one of the other applications everyone's well aware of. Last update I had for the application was somewhere around the last week of April, early May. Again, it's hard to give hard lines. I would expect, knowing the sort of scope of the project, that certainly sometime in May, most likely at the latest, based on where they are in the stage of development right now and what they're building. So that's pretty cool. Also know that for those of you who might be listening that are considering making an investment in Tokenoro, I believe they cleared the legal agreements yesterday, or we're expecting to today, definitely this week is my understanding. So that should be pretty cool. If you're interested in that, definitely, reach out to Sean or whoever you've been working with, Sam and the team. And then we've got the real estate tokenization platform. I know that we have secured someone who's willing to fund the build, and we're now attaching a team, and we're going through the process we normally go through, which is to use our block producers. For folks who may not know as much about what that was like, one of the big criteria for selecting our BPs was their ability to build apps and how they could contribute. And not necessarily that they all had to be like complete software development vendors, but if they weren't, then they certainly had some kind of entrepreneurial experience or access to venture capital or business consulting. That you needed to. There is not a block producer team that we've selected, and I'm pretty sure Mitch can probably back me up on this, that doesn't have experience helping businesses launch, grow, scale. They all have someone or most of their team who can do that. We really don't have any teams I'm aware of that are just totally technical. All they know is like nodes and hardware, right? We wanted to select teams that could help us scale the ecosystem, because we knew that as businesses approached us, that that was going to become a very valuable resource. It's hard to find good blockchain devs and people who understand the space. So, and then the risk transfer, otherwise known as insurance, decentralized insurance app. I don't have any hard dates for that. I know that they've just finalized the scope. They are, or not the scope, I guess the design and scope, because they felt like the real trick for that wasn't going to be so much the back end as it was going to be the front end and the user experience, and making sure that it wasn't confusing, right? Because one, how many people have a lot of experience, in the reinsurance industry? Again, we don't expect initially that this will just be wide open for anybody to go in like a cowboy with their money and start like backing insurance policies randomly. We have some professional insurance groups already attached to this who are expecting to act as not only actuaries, but to be considering issuing policies, basically be users of the platform at first, but then we expect there to be opportunities for individuals in a sort of second layer, phase 2 portion of it, to make investments in the insurance bond market and that kind of thing. So it'll evolve, but I mean, I have no timeline on that. I couldn't tell you. I know that they don't expect the build process to take as long as the design. So kind of just targeting Q2 with all of this stuff. I do expect these things to be launched in one form or another in the next, 3 months, 3.5 months, certainly 3 or 4. And there are a few others, folks have kind of vetted out that, Obulus they made an announcement. They were doing some stuff on the WORBLI testnet. It's a futures startup, futures platform. We really like the group. We think they're great people. I don't have any firm or on the record comments about the fact that, at least to verify that yeah, we've had conversations, and we think it's a great team and a great project. And so we'll kind of see where it goes from there, but we're definitely in conversation with them. And there's a few others, different apps, and maybe, I don't know, is Mitch on? Yeah, there's Mitch. If your name's right.
Yeah.
So just not to put you on the spot, man. I know we're just talking earlier, but What were a couple of the other projects that were just like conversation? I mean, I know Bonham's still working on their stuff. I don't want to forget about.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, we've got a tipping platform coming, sort of a credit rating / professional network coming along. We've got a decentralized storage platform coming along.
We're talking to the guys at Signal X. I just remembered that.
Yes. Yeah.
Trusted token offering, or we'll say tokenizing the VC process. That's a pretty interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Was that it?
I was going to say the Signal X one as a trusted token offering. It's actually back to your point at the beginning, Dom, of protecting, protecting early stage investors or anyone getting involved in a project and worrying that the money that you will put into a project, the people doing the fundraising will just run off with your money. We've seen that happen, God knows how many times the last couple of years. Right. So with it, what Signal X are doing, they're an Australian-based outfit. They're looking at pretty much escrowing funds and then having very specific and experts around the world, oracles and proxies, to validate that the company who's raised the funds has achieved certain milestones, and it protects the investor. Whereas if they do fail at the project, 20% into it, those who may have put some money in will get, let's say, 80% of their money back. And I think that's just, it does talk to what you spoke about earlier, Dom, and it's something this industry desperately needs, is to increase consumer confidence and also business confidence. So that's a very exciting project.
Definitely. Well, again, it's this way in which, right, this is what the traditional VC model's done, but of course for their own capital or for specific investors, right? It's not a consumer protection thing. It's, hey, we've got $1 million into your project. We want weekly meetings, blah, blah, blah. We want to look at your bank statements and, but it would be ideal to expand that more, to hold people accountable for all sorts of projects, and to protect those individuals that are backing these things. So yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, that's all I have for tonight. I don't know. I think that's pretty much the update from the WORBLI side of things. And we're grinding along with compliance as always, but we've just gotten the finalization of our kind of updated AML program. We're working on that. We're working on customer service tools. They're built. We're finally ready to kind of roll them out and start adding the permissions. So we expect that it's going to be faster when it comes to user accounts in terms of like resetting if need be. And also we now have a good process for manually passing users who show up on watch lists. And we can see that it's probably not the same person because the watch lists are not often very accurate. It's kind of like if you ding it at all, it's dinged. But the challenge for us is we really needed to do some serious research on what our liability would be in that scenario, that in fact, this person was flagged by a watch list. How do we properly document and put this person through if we know that the flag probably wasn't accurate? Either it was just a name match, but clearly, the user on the watch list, for example, is in Armenia and the user is actually from Bulgaria. And it's like, okay, it's not the same person. They have totally different country of origin. But it sounds simple, like, well, duh, then just pass the user. But it wasn't that simple. We had to make sure we had the right way to do it, the right way to document it, the right level of permissions for the customer service team internally to do it all properly. And so those things are starting to get rolled out in the next couple of weeks. So that's exciting.
Shall I give a marketing update?
Yeah.
I'll jump straight to it. So the past 2 weeks we've really busy, and we've had a lot of very good news of new partnerships and opportunities arising, which is really going to help WORBLI become a thought leader and a bit of an authority in the enterprise level space, which is really exciting. So firstly, we had confirmation this week from Austrade. Austrade is the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. and it's it's basically the vehicle that Australia used to help businesses export and provide services and generate value back to Australia. And we've had confirmation that we've been invited on their Dubai mission. And the Dubai mission is Dubai have a 2021 mission that pretty much the whole city will be powered by the blockchain. And Mark Patterson, Mark, wave your hand. Mark's going to be representing WORBLI in Dubai for 5 days, and also at the Future Blockchain Summit. And Austrade have already set up, I think, 4 or 5 different meetings with the likes of MasterCard, which will be interesting when we talk about 15,000 transactions per second, but we maybe don't bring that up in the first sentence. So MasterCard, the Dubai Ports Authority, Dubai Future Accelerators, there's a number of government introductions which are also being facilitated. So that's very, very interesting from a very forward-thinking country. So that's going to be happening at the end of March and early April. And another piece of good news this week, the Australian Treasury. So to give some context, the Australian Treasury is the Australian government department responsible for economic policy, fiscal policy, market regulation, and the Australian federal budget. We've been invited to attend 3 different roundtables Thursday this week in Australia. And those roundtables are going to be across financial product law. And the second one is secondary trade and consumer protection, similar to what Dominic was speaking to at the beginning of this call. And thirdly, clarification of stakeholder submissions related to the treatment of ICOs in Australia. So the past kind of 4 to 6 weeks, the Australian Treasury have had an ICO review team compiling all submissions from about, I think they had about 60 or 70 different submissions from all the top 4 accountancy firms, a number of legal firms as well. And WORBLI are going to be sitting at the table with the Australian Treasury to really help them navigate what this industry is about, and also what the technology is capable of. And initial conversations show that WORBLI is doing something incredibly different from what they even know is possible. So that's really exciting for us over here. Another update is we've had confirmation and been invited to speak by Swinburne University in Australia as well, at an event called Cutting Through the Fog and the Future of Financial Services, which is being put on by the Swinburne Australian Graduate School of Entrepreneurship. That's going to be a panel discussion. I'm going to be representing WORBLI there on a panel discussion with, I think there's five other executives. One of them, which I'm quite excited to meet, is the head of corporate relations or corporate at Bendigo and Adelaide Bank. And if you want to check out just a project, up.com.au, up.com.au. It's a new bank that Bendigo and Adelaide Bank of fostering, and there's some very good strategic opportunities arising there. And lastly, we're really just focusing on a variety of enterprise level partnerships, really to educate and ensure that businesses understand what is coming, what the technology can achieve, and who WORBLI are, and how we can really benefit their long-term aspirations. So keep in touch on Medium. We're going to be publishing a fair bit through the blog, and obviously sharing that through our digital and social channels and on email. But there's as Dominic's already said, there's so much going on in the background, and we assure you things are very exciting. So we'll ensure to keep you updated.
Thank you for the update, Sam. Yeah, just really, really proud of you guys on that effort. I know that it was a long tail with Mark and Brooke and everybody on the team, just, getting the conversation. It's not easy to, I wish you guys had just the phone number of the Aussie Prime Minister and you know, the decision makers there, and you could just make a few calls. But I know that it was a lot of contacting. And
well, I also the Australian Prime Minister, I think, is going to be voted out in a few weeks' time. So it is actually quite important. Australian regulation, no laws will be changed in the coming 3 to 6 months because of the type of government in place. But I've lived in Australia 8 years, and I think this will be my 10th Prime Minister. So it's a bit of an embarrassment down there. Anyhow.
So yeah, but I just, you know, there was a lot of effort and energy into that, and it's just,
Appreciate
it. It's when people start talking about, you know, mainstreaming, and, you know, it's like this is how it happens. It's just groups, you know, like us, and getting out there and getting engaged with the governments and getting involved in the conversations. And of course, you know, there's other projects in blockchain that have done it, but that's the boots on the ground effort that this is going to require. So it's really exciting, and something that we've talked about from the beginning. So it's very cool. We're kind of mature enough to get there, which is cool. Rob, did you want to just give us a little rundown on some of the technical stuff? I know I spoke of the pending UX upgrade and the account designation stuff that we're working on. You want to just give a quick few minutes on?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to keep this shorter than usual today, as you can probably hear I'm losing my voice. Yeah, so first and foremost, we're finalizing the development work on the portal rewrite. So it's a reskinning and a re-engineering of the KYC process, which should end up in a smoother kind of user experience for everyone involved. We should be in-house kind of UAT testing sometime next week, and then hopefully towards the end of the month we'll release that. We've also been working on operation tools to help people who kind of get jammed up in the KYC process, to help them get moved further along. Most of the issues are kind of false negatives on these guys, on these individuals. But just due to the compliance requirements, we needed to make sure we had kind of a very comprehensive auditing of the exceptions we make. So if we ever get audited by regulators, we have all of our bases covered. And then to the point on the kind of the blockchain stuff, I've been working for the past week to really bring the WORBLI fork up to date with the upstream repo. So I've just finished, and I'm currently running the unit tests for the core software upgrade to the 1.1.63 version, which is the latest release candidate. So our block producer should be upgrading in the next week. And then I've also been upgrading our system contracts. And although we've got custom system contracts, a few months ago there was kind of a major re-implementation of the contract development kit, and just a lot of the core contracts. Some new functionality, most notably to pin resources for certain accounts. So you can, instead of having it kind of stake-based, you can actually pick an account and say, I just want to grant them this amount of resource, and regardless of their staking, they get that. So we've got some testing to do on testnet. That'll be deployed on our testnet this week, and then we'll be rolling that out definitely before any of the applications launch. And then in relation to that, I'm working on the modifications to the token contracts that we're going to need to support, first of all, Token Oro and the interblockchain work. And both of them have kind of varying degrees. So I'm trying to merge them in with the core token contract. And the interblockchain changes require a sort of kind of escrow type functionality to lock up tokens and whatnot. So I'm implementing that. And then for the Token Oro, and just in general, kind of any sort of token that's going to be restricted to a certain class of users, We're modifying the token contract so a currency can be issued and then only tradable amongst users that have a certain accreditation level. So we'll be keeping, WORBLI will be keeping will be a property that accredited accounts can have. So the most obvious one is an accredited investor, but there's certain to be more. We're working on changes to allow a currency to be created to allow trading or restrict trading to one or more of those contracts. And that'll just, first of all, keep us in line with compliance. And that also kind of creates a de facto kind of OTC mechanism where individuals can kind of come up with their deal terms offline and then just trade directly, kind of removing the middleman. Yeah, that's really it. We're just in kind of general news. We've been working with Titan to really optimize our chain. WORBLI is going to be stepping down from a primary block producer position and hand that over to Titan. And that just is kind of one more step in our kind of decentralization efforts and stuff. And then also in the background, we're working on turning a lot of the all of the key accounts to multi-sig. So the block producers will be the kind of similar to the mainnet, and we're just trying to kind of finalize where or if the WORBLI Foundation kind of lies in that relationship. So and then one other thing too in the background is we are working in conjunction with the Utility X work to implement our usage algorithm. So I think as everyone is aware, I believe it was a couple weeks ago, we did the token burn, which was the first step to that. And then the final thing is implementing the WORBLI usage algorithm to distribute the usage funds, which is usage based. And probably in a future one of these forums, we can probably go into detail on the usage algorithm to kind of explain it to in less technical terms than the descriptions that are out there.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, that sounds good. I think that one of the things Matt and I talked about is that when we get ready and that's actually live, that we might want to just potentially do a live session that focuses entirely on that. Maybe do some walkthroughs and allow for some Q&A so we can really disseminate information quickly to everyone and allow people who want to participate and lock up their tokens to be a part of that process. So exciting stuff. And I know that that's also a top priority for, the Titan and building Utility Access to get that up and running soon. So it's good times. I think that wraps it up, Matt. If we could just do a few questions.
Yeah, 100%, buddy. I had just a few comments because you know me. A few comments, quick question for myself, and there's actually some pretty good questions there that people are asking. So number one, I just wanted to comment, if anybody doesn't know EOS Titan, I'm really excited about that. If you don't know EOS Titan, go check out their website and you can see some of the caliber of some of the tools, the financial tools that they put together. Dominic had mentioned it to me for a long time and I kept putting it off, but I went the other night and I checked it out. So having them announcing a potential 14,000 transactions per second, man, that's really exciting to me. So it's really cool that you announced that. As well as we spoke about last time, of course, access in Africa. A lot of these people might have phones or they might have whatever else, but they don't have bank accounts. If they don't have bank accounts, they can't get PayPal. So just for anybody who's watching and is trying to figure out how WORBLI has the potential to provide that access, ultimately, that's one of the ways by creating an account that is not like a traditional account and then allowing them to be able to accept payment processing for businesses. The broker dealer as well is kind of a big deal. We've talked a little bit about that. If you could maybe just kind of mention, just give kind of a brief breakdown of some of the significance of that broker dealer for anybody who might not be a financial person who's listening to this. You've mentioned potential of broker dealers for some of the STOs. What is significance? What does that do? How is it good for the business? How is it good for the people? And then I have one more question, and we'll move on to take some of these really good questions in the audience.
Awesome. Yeah. So, designations will just allow us to set permissions, right? Really is what it comes down to. And that's one of the great features of EOS at its core. But it's also something that helps us to maintain the level of compliance that we need. And so we expect to have, especially some of these early financial services platforms that are going live, they're not going to be immediately available for consumer grade, right? Like the real estate tokenization platform. It's going to, be licensed realtors or real estate investment trusts and folks like that are putting their properties up there. And we're going to really have to get these processes down before we can automate them and make sure we have the, as they say, that the T's crossed and the I's dotted before we can make it more widely available. And there'll also just be certain applications that require that type of licensure for trading, for example. But it's bringing these things to the chain that then allows the sort of consumer grade version or the consumer access to exist in potentially a sort of a second layer or a sort of a sister application. Like we've talked about the fiat gateways that are being built, and the way that it's designed is it's not that users are going to be able to sort of directly trade within the sort of broader, we'll say, back-end market that requires, again, certain levels of licensure and due diligence before you can get sort of a wholesale account. However, there'll be this sort of little mini ecosystem of applications that we can build off of that will allow individuals to access it. And so broker dealers, for the most part, are individuals that effectively can trade, securities of any kind. They can do issuances, so that, right, if you're going public, for example, with your company, we've talked about this before, what that entails. It's kind of a big process, but it requires an investment bank to do the underwriting. It requires a brokerage firm to actually list the security offering. And so we're constantly looking for ways to find out how we can streamline these processes, how we can make them more efficient, how we can reduce the sort of time to market, and having broker dealers engaged in the platform or potentially partnering directly with some brokerage firms, or possibly having the WORBLI network acquire one. We're kind of looking at all of these things so that, again, we can create a shorter lead time for these financial offerings and also make sure that they're compliant.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting in itself when you kind of break that down a little bit. I'm not going to ask you about the pink elephant in the room, because we all know that you can't really speak about.
I have a pink elephant.
There's a pink elephant. There's a pink elephant in the room. Now, what I'm referring to is block one. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I do want to talk to you about something that kind of rolled up the other day, which I thought was really interesting, and that was kind of some Telegram messages. So I'm not going to put you in the spot in any which way, shape, or form to confirm nor deny anything, but Dan said some really interesting things in the Telegram. I believe it was yesterday, and I did send a lot of those into the room. I don't know if you had the chance to read them, but it was just regarding kind of EOS.io and confirming a lot of the things that you might have been speaking about earlier in terms of private networks, some centralized and being various kingdoms. I wanted to know what you thought of some of the things that he said, if you caught them, and if maybe it was a little bit almost validating for you to hear some of the stuff that he was kind of reiterating.
Well, I've had conversations with Dan in a few different occasions. He's definitely a guy who's, a visionary, extremely intelligent. But I think the alignment, at least for myself and with Dan's views, is that it's ultimately about freedom, right? It's anything that can enhance, increase freedom for individuals is important to me personally. And again, is part of what this project's about: access, creating freedom, more options for individuals to pursue, whatever it is that they might want to in an entrepreneurial sense, or potentially participate now in a gig economy, right? Like, how does an individual programmer in, a developing country participate in the gig economy if they want to sell their services and they can't accept payments? Can't do it, right? So, I always appreciate Dan's commentary around that. I think the biggest reminder that I feel often gets lost in the kind of mainnet maximalism that we sometimes see is that the vision for EOS was always multiple chains. It was very much designed that way. A few reasons. One, that there wouldn't really be a need for hard forks per se, to accommodate different use cases or models or types of governance or whatever. Obviously, side chains will be a great feature in the future when it doesn't need to be an entirely different chain, but side chains aren't enough, for certain projects, especially like ours. And I think there's a lot of good reasons to have an entirely different chain in a sister chain format. So it's just good to see, the guy who's really the visionary behind EOS validate the reason why things like WORBLI exist in not so many words, right? And that this was always part of the vision to have different types of chains, and to see the emphasis on identity, which we very much obviously align with, in that you're just not going to get compliance without identity. And that although anonymity has its use cases, I think that blockchain, for example, in platforms like Steam or newer platforms that I expect and hope are coming that will be uncensorable, that can be phenomenal. That there are people in countries who are victims of despotic regimes or other really just horrible situations that cannot speak out, that cannot reach out. I mean, I'd like to hope that someday maybe, the folks of North Korea might have a voice via blockchain social media, right? Or something like that. So, but for the most part, that's not applicable. There's some edge cases where, again, anonymity is valuable. But when we're talking about financial transacting and reducing incidences of fraud and maintaining levels of compliance with existing government agencies, identity is critical. It's central. And I also think that people forget that they do often just throw their identity around all over the place on the internet now as it is. They're happy to give it to Amazon and to Netflix and to Google and to Facebook. And, their identity's all over the place. Their information's everywhere. It's incredibly insecure. And it's being used and harvested left and right without oftentimes their knowledge, maybe even without their permission, and certainly without putting any dollars in their pocket. And so there's good reasons to bring identity to blockchain. And that's something that we realized very early on. And, so it's cool to see, some support for that. Did you say you had?
Sorry, just fighting with my mouse there. I'm going to go and take a couple of questions here out of the chat. So Rise of King of Fresh, who is an avid supporter, and he's always kind of singing praise for WORBLI from Twitter. I catch him doing it a lot. So much appreciation there, Rise. But Rise asked a question. You might not be able to answer this one. I'm not going to push you too hard on it, but this is something you're able to provide. He's asking if, in regards to the fiat gateway, if a dApp on EOS wants to integrate that, will their users need a WORBLI account? Is that something that you're able to discuss at this time?
I think logistics, it's going to somewhat depend on the app. It's not necessarily going to be a hard requirement. We're actually going back and forth right now with some of the applications that are in development about what account creation needs to look like. I guess I'll say that we're positioning ourselves so that the WORBLI account will act more as a backend for any and all applications, not only on the WORBLI network, but across blockchains, in that it'll effectively become a sort of a a feature set that apps could tap into with, sort of an API potentially, or and that will build sort of integrations in the future that make that easier and easier, right? Like, when you build a WordPress site, there's all kinds of different plugins. It won't be so much like that, but you're building an app, and you might say, well, we love the identity, and we love the access to fiat conversion, and we love the insured wallet that you have, and we want to take those, and we're going to put our UX on it, but in the back end, the WORBLI technology is going to be powering it. So kind of, Sim and marketing and the guys would say, powered by WORBLI would kind of be the mantra. The WORBLI brand is something that will continue to build and grow, but it's not likely to be the front man of the band. It's more like the drummer, driving everything along. That kind of scenario.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. We have Bruce, who's always a constant source of humor inside of our Telegram group. He wanted to know, and you and I have spoke about this, just maybe a quick clarification. Is Gamma still something that's being worked on? Haven't heard anything about Gamma in a while. And as I understand, that's kind of evolved a little bit.
Well, so we started out wanting to build a bank. We felt that was going to be the sort of most direct route to getting, compliant fiat gateways. And at the time, seemed like the best way to go about it effectively. And that we thought that we could use some of the innovations of blockchain to kind of create a crypto bank. And what we found was that it would be, we knew it would be expensive. But the fundraising environment at the time certainly wasn't conducive to raising $50 to $100 million, which is most likely what we probably would have needed. And then in time, it kind of evolved into the idea of, well, wait a minute, do we really need to buy a bank and be a bank, or does the banking experience really matter in the end? I mean, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, does it have to be called a duck? Do you need to, can it be a goose with all the qualities of a duck? I think my analogy is failing at this point, but the bottom line is what you want is the functionality of a bank, right? At the end of the day, that's what you really want. You don't care what it is or what it's called, as long as it works and it gets the job done. And so it continued to kind of evolve, and we thought, well, we could do this in sort of a way where it's like a dashboard and you kind of plug in the apps. I don't think that's something that's like completely off the table, but I guess I'll say that the opportunities that have presented themselves to us in the last, 3 to 6 months just kind of took us in another direction. And we started seeing that we had an opportunity to build out the infrastructure that something like that would need, in that maybe we don't need to do it, but we can build the infrastructure that would be really exciting for someone else. And so maybe as we roll out some of these things, we can start talking to folks like Good Money or other challenger banks out there. I'll say Mark Patterson has a lot of experience in that industry in Australia, and he, a very, successful business, and still does, for many years, working with banks in the technology sector. And so we're pretty familiar. We follow that beat, so to speak, the challenger banks out there and the products that are being built and the companies and services. And so, we're on the lookout. But again, what we feel like is we're going to have the plumbing, the electric, the roads, like the foundation. We're going to have everything for you to just pop your bank on WORBLI. And so that's been our focus. And I suppose that as we get further along and hopefully WORBLI realizes the success we all hope it will, and no one does it, then sure, I wouldn't doubt that, we'd consider reviving that project and putting some more time and energy into it. But at this stage, it's just something that's been effectively, I'd say, put in cold storage. And the hope is that as we roll out what we know is already in the pipeline, that someone else is going to effectively do it, and hopefully multiple people.
Yeah, why have one bank when you can have multiple banks using the platform to compete? I think it's a great idea.
And or realistically, your WORBLI account and the apps on chain,
yeah,
will mostly make up a bank in not too long.
Yeah. Great. Another really good question from Rise of King Fresh, and he's asking about an application, the decentralized insurance application. And I don't know how specific you're able to get right now, so once again, I'm not going to press you. But his question basically is it going to be possible for somebody in time to be able to go and get like house insurance and car insurance because Rise is sick of paying Progressive?
I hope so. I think that's very much the point of the platform. You know, I know that at launch, the plan right now is to stick to a few very specific policies as test cases, and to meet some market needs. Some of the conversations I've heard are around offering like a general liability policy for block producers. People may not realize that block producers do have liability. It's a kind of a different system than it is being like a Bitcoin miner or a Bitcoin node or something like that. So we've been asked this. I know that our block producers have been like, when is this insurance thing going to get rocking? Because we'd like to have some protection. But yeah, the idea will be that any type of policy can eventually be issued. And hopefully, again, we're going to get kind of be eliminating that middle layer that insurance companies are. I mean, I was just speaking today about, seeing the ability to organize and how one of the more effective models we've seen in the States, if you can pull it off, is like a cooperative healthcare model, where 1,000 individuals get together and they agree upon certain terms for the policy, and it's effectively just risk transfer, right? Spreading the risk and amongst a larger group of people, and to protect yourself. That's really all insurance is you're trying to insure against unforeseen events. And I think, it's not a stretch, no matter who you are in the US, for example, to know that our system is pretty busted. And the government's been talking about trying to fix it for the better part of 40 years. And, we've had a few forays in different directions, most of which have all ended poorly. And all we have now still are kind of escalating costs. It's ridiculous part of our GDP. It's well over 10%. A couple $1 trillion a year we're spending, and we're not necessarily getting the best results out of it. And so we know that that's a problem that needs solving. And so, yeah, I'd like to hope that we're going to see like WORBLI health insurance cooperatives, forming, that we're going to see just about every type of insurance out there. And we eventually expect to see the type of functionality where an individual will be able to just put forth a policy request, essentially, right? Like, hey, I want, some insurance, for my treehouse, in the backyard in case it gets hit by a tree. It cost me $1,000 to build. I want $1,000 policy with $100 deductible to insure my treehouse. Might be insane. Maybe nobody will go for it, but you'd have the opportunity to potentially do that, and to create effectively a kind of like a decentralized Lloyd's of London, right? Like, why not? It would be cool.
And that's an industry. Lloyd's of London's an industry which is ripe for, for changing. I think the people I've got a good friend in London who's got a quite a big insurance company, and it's actually insurance for gig economies. So they can insure a cleaner going into a house. I think he said it's about 8 or 10 pence per half hour that they're in someone else's property. And unfortunately, they have to fund their insurance through their own networks, because Lloyd's of London, it's not very progressive. It's a 100-year-old business with very old mindsets. So it is exciting. I think that's really good context as well, Dom.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to ask a quick question to Mark Peterson. Sorry, Mark. I know I really like Mark, and I've had the opportunity to interview him. And you kind of mentioned briefly, like for anybody who doesn't know Mark was actually involved in bringing creating online banking, like making online banking a real thing. That's the kind of experience that this guy has, and creating a lot of interesting technologies, like bringing biorhythmic banking in, and just a lot of different projects over his life. Mark is an intelligent guy. He's a funny guy. Mark, you're going to be heading over to do kind of some evangelization for WORBLI. Sam had said that you're going to be heading over to, I think it was United Arab Emirates, I think it was Dubai. What are you doing over there, and why is what you're doing important to WORBLI as a whole?
Thanks, Matt. I was lucky enough to get selected by Austrade to participate in their Dubai blockchain mission. Sam mentioned it earlier. Austrade's the Australian Federal Government's Trade and Investment Commission, and they focus primarily on helping Australian businesses with export opportunities. So we've approached Austrade to join this mission, and we're going to be going to Dubai, and I fly out on the 30th of March and I'll come back on the 4th of April. Austrade have organised a day and a half of meetings with the Dubai government representatives, with DP World. For those who don't know, DP World is Dubai's entity that owns an enormous number of ports around the world. They're a significant business. And MasterCard and other entities. So we're going to have a day and a half with these people, get close with them and get to learn a little bit about their goals and aspirations and what they want to do. I'll certainly be promoting WORBLI as a provider of product and service to them, hopefully soliciting some interest. And then after that, I get to attend the Future Blockchain Summit in Dubai for 2 days. There's 14,000 attendees. So, I'll stand out in the crowd. I'll be just one of 14,000 people rushing around trying to have as many useful conversations and find out what exhibitors, hear as many speakers as I can. I think there's something like 130 speakers or 150 speakers from 130 countries. It's a phenomenal conference held on a grand scale. So in effect, I'll be trying to jam in as much as I can, sleep as little as possible, meet as many people as I can. I've been lucky enough to engage with a guy called Sean Dennis, who's the entrepreneur in residence at Dubai Future Accelerators. And Sam and I are going to have an online conversation with him on Thursday night, local time here in Australia, and get to know him a little better and talk to him about our goals and aspirations and what we'd like to do. And we've also recently partnered with a university here in Australia, and I'll be exploring some opportunities on behalf of that university, seeing if I can assist in getting them to partner with another university in the UAE. So, yeah, no sleep, lots of running around, lots of things to do, lots of excitement. I've got a massive reading to get done between now and then. So, yeah, really looking forward to it. Should be a lot of fun.
The university piece as well is actually it's evangelizing a master's degree in financial technology and blockchain. So there's, which is the first in Australia as well with Swinburne. And they're very excited to try and get this to other parts of the world, because it's an area of industry which doesn't have much academia and much research into at the moment. And it's something that certainly when, we talk about enterprise businesses, they need academia. They need to see that there's proof in the pudding, and it's not just it's not just us on Zoom, hypothesizing that this is all good and well. The academics are an important part of WORBLI, and I think our strategy moving forward as well. So it's really exciting.
There's a lot of love for WORBLI down here in Australia at the moment, which is really cool.
It really is. And I think that soon enough, there's going to be a lot of love for WORBLI all over the world, because I know that you guys are the right team doing the right things to make sure that people know about WORBLI and making sure that it's used. So I won't kick this off for too much longer, but I do want to ask one more question, just because Michael asked it, and Michael, again, is another supporter. Just a quick intermission here, just for everybody who's watching, everybody who participates, everybody who's kind of, invested in WORBLI and taking the time to take an interest. We really appreciate you guys. And this is an initiative by Dominic and the team to make sure that we're kind of addressing at least every 2 weeks what you guys are doing, because we do care about the community. We do care about everybody, and we do appreciate all the support that you guys are giving. There's some really amazing things coming. I can promise you that, or I wouldn't be here. So anyway, that being said, I wanted to take the time to answer Michael's question. Michael has asked when WORBLI Rex. So WORBLI love. So the people, I know there was kind of a mention earlier, Dominic, of Rex like application, is that essentially utility X, or is there still at some point going to be some sort of integration in something that might resemble Rex?
No, we're, very particular about our economic model. It's been thought through for thousands of hours amongst numerous people. It's not by accident, and it all works together in a kind of a unifying whole. And I'm not saying it's perfect. We'll see it out in the wild and we'll adjust accordingly as we go. But we feel pretty good about the infrastructure and the concepts that are in place. And so it's really our usage algorithm combined with our resource model that we feel is just a simplified Rex. It doesn't require tokens and all kinds of new things. It doesn't require voting. You simply lock your tokens for 30 days and you receive a portion of the inflation that's tied to network usage, which very much means activity on chain, and then leasing. So we've kind of combined it all in one. It is going to be hosted on the Utility X platform. So it's like a feature of Utility X, so to speak. But it's not Utility X. Utility X is a derivatives platform that's hosting the resource model and will have additional features in the future. But I think the model's pretty brilliant in that as network usage goes up, the amount of inflation rewards go up, and therefore your rewards for locking your tokens, effectively giving your resources back to the network for that 30-day interval, it rewards you as it goes up. But then as usage goes up and starts to get to that 40, 50%, the network starting to approach capacity, what we expect is that there'll be more and more leasing because it should be reflected in token price. And so now token price should be rising. And as token price is rising, it becomes less attractive or less viable for an application to just simply buy the tokens straight away for network resources. It might make more sense, or probably will make more sense, for applications to lease. Or as the network usage is rising, it's also going to mean that there aren't as many resources available to go around. So let's say an app is experiencing like a spike. Again, much like on mainnet, we've seen some of the gambling applications, they then makes it more sense for them to rent and lease the utility that they need near term. And then, as the spike ends or things start to level off again for the application, it gives them that flexibility. And so, but we expect the leasing rewards to start to increase. And so what happens in our model is as usage starts to tip past 50 and 60%, and we're nearing network capacity, the rewards for actual usage algorithm go down, but we expect the leasing pool should be increased. And any leasing that occurs gets distributed amongst everyone who has locked tokens proportionally. So let's say, Matt, you have 100 tokens and I have 100 tokens, and there's 50 WORBLI worth of leasing that gets done over the 30-day period. You'd get 25 and I'd get 25. If there was 10 people, it would be split by 10 individuals, but again, in proportion to their amount of locked tokens. And we want to be clear about the terminology. It's not staked, right? Staked is for applications only, really. Users can. I know some people are doing it, including yourself, as like a security measure right now, which is smart. And if users are really like super power users, maybe they're doing a ton of WORBLI transactions back and forth because they're sort of high volume traders possibly or something, they will likely reach their maximum capacity for daily token transfers or activity, CPU, and they might need to stake short term. So that'll be available, but we don't expect it'll be needed very much. And as we get data, as users are using the platform and we see approximately how many transactions on average per day users are doing, if the amount of CPU that we're designating for that is too low, we'll raise it. If it's too high, we'll probably lower it a little bit to give some of those, we'll adjust accordingly. But our goal is that the average user never talks about staking or any of that stuff, in the future. And so, but that's our version of Rex. We won't be porting Rex over. We don't have any plans to do that at this time or activate it on WORBLI at all. We don't think it's necessary.
And I'll just add to what Dom said. What we're going to be actually implementing this over the next few weeks. So as I mentioned in my update, I think this is probably something not in the next meeting, but maybe the next one after that or the following one. It's probably worth spending some time in this forum to discuss it. And I'm sure I'll have some artifacts that come out of just the implementation that'll help kind of digestible just to the average user, because I think it's important that people understand the usage algorithm and stuff. So good question, and we'll work on making that more clear.
So Robert, in between trying to break down the incredibly complex reward system for staking and throwing this thing into hyperdrive and hitting 14,000 transactions per second in the next little while, you have your work cut out for you, sir. Along with so that's really cool to hear. Dominic, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then don't pass it back to me, because I'm going to keep asking you questions, and then like our family will be looking for us, and we'll all be sitting here talking about WORBLI, and it'll be like a week later. It'll get messy. But somebody mentioned one thing that I did want to ask you about, because it's something that I'm interested in, and I think earlier Gamma had kind of talked about the possibility, and I know Gamma is kind of set aside, but Gamma talked about the possibility of a debit card. Is that still something that might come later on? Obviously, maybe it's not as high of a priority at this point, but is there going to be at some point where perhaps there will be a debit card that you can actually use with your WORBLI?
Someone from our team meeting earlier today, like asking all the questions or feeding the crowd. As we covered all of this today, it was interesting. It wasn't necessarily on the agenda, but something we got into. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's going to be an opportunity for people to provide that service. I know that months ago I had conversations with some fairly influential people at Visa that they don't have a problem offering wholesale accounts. It's a connection that Sam introduced me to that he has. There's definitely a possibility to do that. Again, I think the difference in what changed as we got deeper and deeper into the compliance process as well is towing all these lines and boundaries properly, right? And the foundation has to occupy a certain space in order to sort of manage the compliance of the network and to take its role amongst the stakeholders long term. And so it can't necessarily be like the one instigating all of these businesses and running and controlling all of these businesses. It's just a conflict of interest. It's a compliance mess. It doesn't allow it to be kind of Switzerland, which is what it needs to be in the system. It needs to be neutral. It needs to be the entity that sort of drives the infrastructure, the base layer of the network, like it does now, right? Like Rob talking about updating the system contracts. It needs to be the origin of governance. And so it's already evolving. One of the things we're doing is developing a business development company that's getting incorporated here shortly, that's going to take that over. So we won't actually have business development in the foundation. There'll be a separate entity doing that. We've got a verified marketing agency now, sort of led by Sam and the team. That marketing is not really directly in the foundation anymore. It's contracted work. We're talking about the eventuality of moving compliance even out of the foundation directly, so that compliance can be its own standalone entity within the network. And so the debit card thing would be another business that somebody would be able to start up and very likely connect with the fiat gateways to make that a feature for users that taps into their fiat account and allows them spendable. I was using the example today with the team of like what we'd like to see eventually is that if you were standing there with your mobile phone and you had your WORBLI application open for trading your digital assets into cryptocurrency, You could, grab WORBLI, trade it to, USD, and then if you were standing in an ATM, immediately put in your debit card and get cash, and do that hopefully in a matter of 60 seconds. That type of functionality in the longer term. You could even, if the rates were better and the liquidity was different, the pricing was better, trade it into USD and then convert that USD to Canadian dollars if you were in Canada, and go boom, bang, bang, right? Or send that money overseas, or convert it into the currency of the country you're currently visiting, to make it a little bit easier and to reduce the foreign exchange rate for yourself, right? So those are the type of things longer term, but it was a kind of a long answer for the fact that yes, we expect there to be debit cards, hopefully again, multiple providers with different features, and that people see the opportunity to open a business on WORBLI providing that service. And if not, you can bet your ass the business development company will be working on that project, with someone. Okay, I'm not throwing it back because we'll just keep going. Yeah, it is 7:30. We're kind of trying to put a hard limit on everybody's time, but thank you, everybody. We'll just go ahead and close it out. Appreciate it. See everybody in 2 weeks, and thank you for all your support.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.